Hello and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. This week we're diving into something that rarely makes it onto a leadership strategy, but absolutely should. Play. Because, as I've said once or twice before, play isn't just for kids and it's not something we should have grown out of. Play is actually a secret weapon. Fuel for creativity, problem solving, resilience and connection. But somewhere along the way, many of us started treating it like a luxury instead of a necessity. So today, in the same way that we did with stories, we're flipping that narrative. We'll be exploring why play isn't just fun, the science behind it, and Stuart Brown's compass of joy and play personalities. What personality type might you be? And how do we bring play back into our world without feeling ridiculous or like we're at the circus? Because what if play wasn't something to make time for, but something that actually made time better? I, for one, without any pressure, have been waiting for this episode forever. So let's get into it. This is Being Playful. And you were hoping that I was going to talk for a bit longer because I ought to send you a question of playfulness right now because you've got a mouthful of food.
Yep, that's true.
That's not a good way to start.
I'm about to choke.
Let me just try and fill in for a little moment or two.
Okay, I'm done now. I'm good. I can't give myself the Heimlich maneuver. Or apparently I could
God.
if I bashed myself against the wall.
That doesn't sound
I'm
playful.
going to try and avoid that.
We need to keep this sort of like quite light-hearted without anything too serious going on, like you injuring yourself. Play.
Okay, yes.
But yes, we're trying to find ways of making this playful light, but sensible enough that we are looking to encourage those adults amongst us who do think that play is a luxury and not really anything they've got time for, to work out how they can actually back into their lives. And I think I've said this before, both in the mini and in the reflection, you have to be really careful when you start Googling adult play. Because I got a lot more than I got a lot more than I bargained for, and as I think we might have said before, that is a very different podcast that we're not getting into.
Maybe another time.
Lifetime when we're not trying to talk about life and leadership. So without you being too silly, what do you do to play?
What do you mean without me being? How can you say that and then talk about play and tell me I'm not allowed to be silly? What?
You could say
talk about controlling.
You have the freedom to say. So I was just wondering what on earth you might come up with. I was just giving you a taste of your own medicine after what we heard on the last episode where you're trying to control people's stories. So.
Yeah, I know, that's true. Well, no, I was trying to control my story. I didn't want someone else to take away my story, but yes.
Play.
How very dare they? I guess, yeah, and I found, I guess, a bit like you. When I started looking at creativity, and I did become aware that I wasn't as playful as maybe I had been when I was younger. And I think you indicated that too. And everybody who did the course that I was on said exactly the same thing, that we kind of were given permission to just do nonsense things that we just wouldn't be able to do at work. And so, we got Lego out and made little ducks, and we were tasked with creating something new and then having to present it in a particular way. And what struck me was, first of all, how everyone, for the whole of the course that I was, during the period of the course that I was on, everyone had the biggest smile on their face, but just beaming. I've been on lots of other courses where you're kind of like, ooh, but everybody really, really was looking forward. You come in and go, well, what are we going to do today? And there'd be all these coloured pieces of paper and glitter sticks and post-it notes and egg boxes, scissors. And you'd be like, oh, what are we going to do today? This looks really cool. And so everybody just smiled, and also acknowledged that, this was not something that we would normally allowed, I'm doing parentheses there, to do. And how much I enjoyed it. I was like, God, I've missed this. So yeah, a bit like you. And I do bring sort of playfulness into my life because I have random ideas that pop into my head and I go off on a little weird tangent and then spend a lot of time giggling to myself because I'm hilarious.
You really are.
And then, I'll be wandering along and suddenly start giggling, and Mohammed will be like, what? Stop it. You look crazy. People are looking at us. What are you doing? And every now and then I'll just go and hug a tree. And to be honest, I do that now deliberately because he hates it. He doesn't hate the tree. He hates me hugging the tree. Maybe he's jealous. I don't know. So I still have an element of playfulness, but to actually play
Yeah.
was something that I
I
hadn't done
think
for a long time.
Do you know, we're so well into our episodes now. I can't remember stories I've told and stories that I haven't. But again, when I was first starting out along my path of learning to coach and the self-development stuff that I was doing, I ended up out in San Francisco at this conference for the coaching program I was going to be part and parcel of, but I'd only been on one session and so wasn't very into their way of doing things or whatever. So I end up at this conference, and because we were going to be out in San Francisco, we decided to go for a bit longer. Ash had decided that he was coming with me as well, as you do, and the lovely Nina was going to be there, who we've had on a show before, and her husband.
Hey, Nina.
So I went out for sort of like the when they sometimes do the pre-conference workshop before you get to the conference. So I'd got 2 days of learning before that. Anyway, so I turf up and I go into this room, and similarly to what you've just described, lots of flip chart, paints, glitter, water pistols, cowboy hats, jelly beans. The list was endless. And so we get in, there's no interlude, and the guy running it says, okay, so let's play. Let's play for the next hour or so. So I watched all these people, most of them who've been in this mix for quite a while, just up they get and off they go. There's a flipping great water fight going on around the room, jumping on tables. People are hyped up on sugar because they're just like stuffing handfuls of jelly beans into their mouths. And I thought, what the hell is going on? Which sounds very unlike me with what you know of me of the past, and what people are probably getting conveyed since we've been started doing this. But I took myself into a corner with a piece of paper and paints and sat quietly just painting a picture. I went absolutely fucking ballistic when the water fight destroyed it. At which point I went looking for a gun.
Let's just be clear, because you were in America, so you know that
a water pistol. Yes,
a water pistol gun. There is a possibility.
Nearly took a very nasty turn. No, so a water pistol. I thought, right, and then sort of like got into it. And the next thing I found, and I was with these crayons that you could draw on windows with. And so then I'm drawing all over the windows along with a whole load of other people and chatting, and sort of like got much more into it. And then was watching these people in the skyrise next to us who were in banking, all looking out the window from their meeting, wondering what the hell was going on. Thinking
jealously,
people must be in there on some massive LSD trip or something. No, just a jelly bean trip. But I was exhausted. But of course, it made all of that level of dopamine rise, all the stuff that I realise in the science now. It built better connections. I knew people that much better before I'd ever been introduced to anyone. And it really was like, when you put kids, when they've got to a particular age, and just how quickly they all get into their make-believe things. You'll say, who did you play with afterwards? They don't know anybody's name. They've just got in there and got on with it.
Yeah,
and that's what these adults are expected to do, some of whom had clearly been involved in this thing for a while and knew that was the case. I get to see my grandson or my nieces, and I'm on the floor and playing some ridiculous game or making up some story or doing something nuts, and just look for the moment I can play every single chance I can get. And a bit like your poor husband, mine gets dragged into my antics.
But he's much more willing playmate in terms of, so many of our experience in the military, in terms of there's an obsession with fancy dress in the military, right? Or certainly the elements of the military that I have ever been involved in. There is absolutely, it's kind of the law that regardless of all of the, sort of things that we do,
we will
at every opportunity, pretty much there is fancy dress. We want to dress up. And even that, I sort of thought, God, I haven't dressed up in a while, until maybe my mid-40s. I do wonder, actually, Mohammed, I'm going to have a word with you when I get back, because he gets embarrassed by me dressing up. And I still do it occasionally for things like Halloween in Ireland. Tomake is a huge, huge festival. And we have this amazing festival right on our doorstep called the Dragon of Shandon, which is this amazing parade of costumes and this enormous dragon that goes through the streets and all kinds of other crazy creatures. And I insist that we dress up. And Mohammed, he will go to, as far as he might wear a mask and a cloak. And then he's always a vampire, right? That's about as far as I can get. Whereas I will be all kinds of things, and I'll spend 2 hours doing my makeup and finding exactly the right piece of clothing. I go into the fancy dress box because we've all got a fancy dress box, haven't we?
I have two
Bobby,
very large
several fancy dress boxes. The real regret of when I moved to Ireland was when I had to get rid of years of fancy dress stuff that I have accumulated over the years. I'm absolutely gutted by that.
Fancy, my husband is a reluctant playmate on occasion, or similarly to yours, he's been lured into something that he believes is factual when I've made it up. So when we went to Aber Voyage or Voyage, or how it's another word that I probably am saying incorrectly, I told him that everybody dressed up, and so I bought him an ABBA outfit, and of course then when we arrive and he realises that that's not the case at all, he's very cross for a moment, and then he sort of like gets into it. And so of course by the end of the evening, you know, he's nice and hyper and everyone's dancing with him and he's having a great time, like it was always his idea in the first place. But he gives me that look of you have done it to me again. But there'll be the sort of like the smaller moments where there'll be a piece of music on. I remember, I don't know if you saw this on Instagram, but I managed to convince him to what I do call rabbit dance, where you have to sort of like pretend that you're hopping about. I'm now doing the movement of pretending to hopping about, holding your hands in front of you like a rabbit to the music, whilst we just sort of like sat down. I was like, come on, let's rabbit dance. Then he realises, of course, I'm recording it and I'm using it as an Instagram post. So he gets really, I think he does get really cross. I like to pretend that he's pretending to be cross. But I think he does think that I use him as sort of like
comedy element
on social media. So my playfulness tends to include him in it, whether he likes it or not, which I'm sorry about, Ash. Sorry, not sorry, really, because I think it's hilarious. And so does everybody else. But I will also laugh at myself from a playfulness thing. But, you know, you and I were away only a matter of months ago and found the Paradox Museum where we could go and play all day.
That was fun.
You know, get out of the way, kids, because we need to take our picture doing something else ridiculous. But
so it was four women in their 50s, just scampering around, cackling about all kinds of nonsense. And it literally was a sort of pushing children out of the way so we could have a go.
Not sorry. Again, sorry. And it's interesting, I am in the process of writing team development workshops at the moment, which are incorporating much more play into them and having those conversations with the organisations of, look, I'm not going to ask anyone to do interpretive dance, but can we create stories through different mediums like Lego and like painting and like chopping up magazines and sticking them up on walls and stuff like that? Because as we talked about in the storytelling element, but this whole business about using different parts of your brain with play unlocks a whole host of other things that I think are good in life and within our workplaces. So that's the reason that we're bringing all of this up today. And I think that we are well placed in our playfulness of having kept it alive as adults, even if it does mean dressing up oddly most of the time.
Your story about tricking Ash into turning up in fancy dress reminded me of when I joined my first regiment straight out of Sandhurst, and I turned up, and one of the things that happens,
because I know this story. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Sit back, everyone. You're going to love this one. Right.
It doesn't involve me being naked though, for a change, so that's great. So I turned up, and one of the things that happens to young officers is that the rest of the officers in the regiment will try and play a trick on you. Anyway, I was expecting that there would be some kind of trick played on me, and I arrived and I was like, you're not going to get me. You're not going to get me. And so they bided their time, you know, we went through and I was like, you're not going to get me, you're not going to get me. And then they discovered that I loved fancy dress. Stupidly, at some point, somebody said something and I was like, oh God, I love fancy dress. So then we were invited to our company commander's house, barbecue or something, and it was fancy dress. And so I was very excited. I was like, okay. And the guys were like, it's farmyard theme bridge. And I was like, okay, farmyard theme. Brilliant, brilliant. And they said, look, we can get you this amazing chicken outfit if you want. And I was like, no, 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 it's all right. I am all over this. I am going as a cat. So I was a lot more svelte. And I had, black footless tights, a little black leotard. I had a little tail that I'd made, and I had little ears on a headband. And I, drew a little black nose and whiskers, and meow. And I was going around, and I don't know, I was doing something. I was going to be late, so they were like, "Okay, we're all going to go, and you can join us later." The warning signal should have been there. Anyways, I'm dressed up as a cat. Get into the car. There's a poor old corporal who's driving me, who just doesn't know where to look. And then he drops me off. I get out, go and knock on the door, and as the door opens, I go meow. And it was not my OC, it was the colonel of the regiment, who didn't really have very much of a sense of humour, and he didn't think it was funny at all. And luckily, his wife, quite weirdly, was actually quite fun, and she'd been pre-briefed by the rest of the subalterns, so she just kind of went, "Bridget, I think you probably need a drink." And I was like, yes, yes, fuck me, I need a drink. Of course, the swearing and the drinking didn't go down well with the colonel either, which is probably like the first time he'd met me, other than me kind of wandering around. So yeah, for 2 years afterwards, he had me down as some kind of crazy, drunken, sweary, uncouth female who should behave far more maidenly. They were going to leave me to have to get back, but the corporal had waited, and he came around the corner and picked me up and took me back to the bar, where everyone was just waiting, pissing themselves laughing as I'm wandering around
we need to actually
as a cat.
Give some lessons learned in all of this, but I do feel the need to let you know that you're not alone, because before we got onto our troop commanders course, we were sent on attachment, weren't we? And so I was in Germany and sent to a unit that was disbanding. So they were having big parades and all the rest of it. So one of the squadron commanders said to me, look, he said, there's going to be like the adjutant's parade, but we want to sort of like make it quite light-hearted, because, the boys are feeling quite disheartened about the unit going and everyone going back to the UK, etc., etc. So we'd like you to dress up to be the pretend adjutant. I said, okay. And of course, oh yes, sir. Anything you say. Trying to be all people pleasing. So I think it would be really good if you turned up in fancy dress. So I said, well, what sort of fancy dress? No, over to you. Total freedom. Dress up in what you like. So I went back into the mess, and to be fair, this was real. The problem was there had been no sign off on it. So off we go to a big fancy dress shop. I end up in this, red and green checked jester's outfit, the hat, the pointy shoes, and a balloon on a stick, just like medieval times. And so the colonel's car arrives to pick me up, like the dignitary that I'm pretending to be. And I get into the colonel's car, and he is sat there totally stony-faced, saying, I have not been briefed on this.
What the fuck?
I died 1,000 deaths. So, oh my God, I'm cringing just thinking about it now. But what had made it even worse was that I was a bit still hungover and really sort of like not thinking what I was doing. So I hit him with the balloon as I got into the car, going, morning. Morning. Oh God, I am dying. I was like, oh my God. And so, but having been smacked with this balloon, he then says, I haven't been briefed on this, at which point I died 1,000 deaths. And so we get there. And of course, everyone's wetting themselves laughing, thinking it's really funny, but I know quite how angry he is. So then I'm like, right, do I just play it down, or do I just, do as I was told to do by the squadron commander? So I skip up onto the podium, and I take the first salute, at which point the colonel is just incandescent with rage. And so the squadron commander comes and scuttles up and sort of like whisks me off the podium and feeds me back into the colonel's car, and I'm whisked away thinking, do I just pack? Now, I've been there 3 days. I was like, do I just pack now? So I sat in my room thinking, I am done for. And all the way there, he kept saying to me, who decided this? And so I was also not prepared to drop anyone in it. So was saying, no, Colonel, it was entirely my own idea. I just thought it'd be funny, and it clearly isn't. I'm really sorry, and wouldn't drop anyone in it. Anyway, I then get a call that you've got to go to the adjutant's office, and so he's then there, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get an absolute, bollocking now. He said the colonel's busy, he's not going to speak to you direct, but he wants you to know this is nothing to do with you. You just draw a line under it and you continue with your attachment. This is clearly not your doing. And thank God the squadron commander had come forward and gone to see him and said, Colonel, this was nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
I completely signed her up to it and thought that he'd think it was fine, which he clearly didn't. But oh my God, I saw these guys over and over again throughout the whole of my career. And if you're talking about stories that bloody well stick, that was one I never got rid of. Probably the same as
you're never going to get rid of that one.
But again, as we're saying, there are these things like the stories and play that can really show you up in particular ways, but also make you incredibly memorable, whether you choose to be or not.
Now, I found a very long article, and I'm not going to go into the whole article, but just a little piece of it, which may be a segue for you. So it's called Games Managers Play as a Form of Leadership Development by Dr. Ronit Kark of the Bar Ilan University. This bit just struck me as interesting when I was speed reading the very long article, which I will attach, but if anyone feels the need to look at this sort of thing. But it was about this idea that play is a unique and universal human experience. And I'm not entirely sure that it is just a human experience, because I think other animals do play, but it is sort of a universal human experience. All humans, apart from maybe
and the two colonels,
Elon Musk and Donald Trump,
talking about.
and and the colonels. But there's a book from 1955 by Huizanga. I'm not entirely sure whether I pronounced that correctly, called Homo Ludens, the man who plays. And that book effectively explains the centrality of play to humanity and how important it is and how it's manifested throughout all of our lives. And then they look at this idea that in the post-industrial revolution, somehow there was this split, and it's a myth, that we created these different spheres of public, and then the workplace was separated from the private sphere, so that's when play became removed from our experience in the workplace. Prior to that, it was kind of normal. You work and play and everything was all together. But then in this point of the post-industrial revolution, where you just split it all up, and then we focused on organization, efficiency, rationality, blah, 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 that removed play from the experience of work. And obviously now there's all this very long article as one of the sort of assessments of how important, well, it's a missing piece, effectively, how important it is for all of our behaviour, whether we're in work or not. And so now there's a lot more academic studies on why play is so important in the workplace. So that's the segue to why we're talking about play.
That works with is that, from my coaching background, and integral development coaching is about living an integrated life. And again, we've probably talked about this before, but what is often that misnomer is that your work character and your home character, and when they're so very different, it jeopardizes one or other, because you're not necessarily showing up as self. And the older I get, the more I show up as self in the workplace. I mean, it's going to come out with the personalities, but not necessarily being the clown, but holding things slightly more lightly to get things done. So that integrated bit, I think, is really important. And so that almost is, in my humble opinion, that you have to have a look about how you bring play back into everyday life before you can talk about how you can bring it into leadership, because there's no point sort of like trying to work out how to do it in the job role if it's not going to be a part of who you actually are, and finding the things that make you tick. So, how do people who have believed for many years as an adult that play is off limits to them now because they're no longer a child, how do they bring that back into their lives without feeling ridiculous? And I think that you and I can safely say that we don't ever feel ridiculous with this, with the way that we comport ourselves.
We might be ridiculous, but I don't know that we necessarily feel ridiculous.
So if you ask Mo or Ash, you get a very different version of it, but we're very happy with who we are. Thank you very much, boys. So it's things like childhood joys. And we've been talking about some of those. So, you know, our love of fancy dress has never left us. The art of make-believe, dancing, singing for me.
Yeah.
But for some other people, it may well be chess or collecting something. So, and I'm going to come on to the personalities because I think that they play a part in actually just recapturing what it was that used to make you tick as a kid. And then find micro play moments. So, you know, I'm not asking people to go out and have whole days of play. They may well wish to. But if you're trying to reincorporate something into life, you know, when I'm talking about practices as a coach with my clients, I try to get them to think together about things that can fit into life as it is. So if it was drawing and art, just doodle. Get a colouring in book. If it was crosswords or, you know, the word game side of things. If it's movement, find a movement practice, but only do it for 5. Dance in the kitchen, sing in the shower, you know, whatever it might be. But those tiny micro moments. And then also this whole business we've talked before about community and finding your people. Sometimes it's easier to play with that sounds really bad. Play with others. I know.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean, Bobby. It's fine. Don't worry.
Coming out of my mouth, thinking, "Oh God, no!" But play. Yes.
Let's play with other people. You know, adult play.
Whilst we try and force our husbands into our levels of playfulness. You know, they are our playmates. Again, get with the program, guys. But yeah, finding people. So I sing in a choir. Those sort of like elements where those things can happen. But I think that the more that we can elicit and remind ourselves that it's okay, because it's part and parcel possibly of our self-care as well, because it's kicking in different hormones, different ways of being, different levels of relaxation, that those things can actually then go back into the workplace. So that's the segue in the first instance, I think, to look at the play personalities, because again what I did with these is I took a look at them and tried to go on the play personalities and the sort of things that might work in life but also at work. So we're going to put it in the references, but the first thing, so that we can actually get into the 8 of them, is that there's a little quiz that you can take to decide or to give some steer as to the play personality type that you actually are. So this is the moment. I did. So this is the moment.
And you sent it to me,
for you to
and we've both done it now.
What your play personality is. Are you?
I am a storyteller.
After all you said in the last episode, I'm not sure if I'm a storyteller or not.
I know. Well, I was. You know how you said when you looked at it and you redid the test a couple of times because you were like, I don't want to be that one. And I thought I was going to be the creative play person.
So what it says,
apparently
I'm
a storyteller.
From a life perspective. So let's see if this works for you. Loves books, movies, improvisation, making sense of experiences. I mean, you do like to make sense of stuff. You know, that's where you get your certainty element from. So I think that works.
Yes, that's true.
And then at work, it's using narrative to lead and inspire. So you might not think that you're doing it, but I think that you do.
So
So I was the storyteller, but I thought I'm going to go and do it again, and then I got slightly concerned because I then became the Joker. It's like, oh God.
Well, that's bearing in mind that you've just told a story about you being a Joker.
Sticking in. But and then I was like, oh God, no, I don't want to be that either. This is so awful, isn't it? But you can game, because you can game the.
So you did it again.
And I guess it's like any of these things. It's like we always say with any form of quizzes or with profiling or whatever it might be, you're never only one thing. But I guess when I then I looked at it, and it says in life of the party finds joy in making others laugh. Yeah, okay, fine. I'll live with that. And at work, uses humour to shift energy and ease tension. And I'm not there with a red nose on or big flippy shoes, but I am the person who more often at work than at home, I think, is the one that tries to lighten the tension by hang on, we've got this, we can do this a different way, and can try and humour my way out of it. So that's 2. the third. So here's the others, and we can sort of like say whether we think that there's part and parcel of this in us or not. So I'll go with the one that is probably another word that I'm going to say incorrectly. I used to think I was quite good with words. I think I'm getting worse. The kinesthetic or the kinesthet. So from a life perspective, love sports, dancing, outdoor adventures. So very much around movement. And at work, thinks better while moving, enjoys active teamwork. So I love that because we hopefully will come on to some of the leadership elements to it. But that's a key one about having walking meetings. For some people, they'll do much better thinking if they're on the move rather than sat on their asses round a table, looking at slides. So I thought that was quite good. The explorer, so loves travel, trying new hobbies, intellectual curiosity. I wondered if this was going to be you, actually. And then at work, tries new ideas and experiences. So as I say, there's different parts of us in this. So where are we up to? The fifth one is the competitor. So again, enjoys games, sports, or self-imposed goals in life, and goal-oriented, thrives on challenges in work. The collector loves building expertise, collecting meaningful things, and then so they're the gatherer of ideas, skills, and experiences. The artist, creator, so crafts, writes, builds or experiments with new ideas, problem solves through creativity. I wondered if there was more of that in me, but I think the Joker still wins out, sadly. And then the director, so the planner, loves organising events and group games, natural organiser, enjoys leading strategy. So there are, whilst they go 8 play personalities, and that might put some adults off, I think that it would be a bad idea to do the quiz and find out and then go, right, how does that show up in life? Does it show up in life? And if not, can I do the micro activities to get more of that in there? And then how do I actually then take that and apply that at work? So I thought that was the best way to segue into the leadership bit. And from a leadership bit, I think the way that I was trying to look at this, I'll shut up because I've talked a lot for a while. I mean, do you want to say anything on that bit first before we go on?
I think that the only thing that I was going to say was it's also worth looking at your team's play personalities as an interesting thing because it's a way of understanding how you can motivate, how you can free up people's way of thinking. If you understand that someone, to solve a problem needs to have a board with lots of coloured papers and pens, or someone needs to go for a walk, or someone needs to, whatever it is that they need to do, it's also helpful in terms of your sort of team management, I guess.
I'd also taken a look at how do you introduce play into leadership without turning it into a flipping circus or looking too childish. And it is that thing about if you were to all do the quiz so that you knew what your play personality was like, again, just holding that lightly, but it may well be that you can then be saying to people, right, well, if that's what the play personality, we can take a look at that for how we are generating ideas. So it's not necessarily that you decide that you're going to align a particular play style to your routine weekly meeting, but that generating ideas sort of like workshoppy style, or wanting to get out of that solutioneering mode that we talked about with storytelling, or when you've got a problem to solve or whatever, or it's a trickier conversation. I think that there's also, and again, this is the thing, there's no right or wrong with this, but it's just a case of experiment with when would it be better to hold things slightly lighter, and what are the things that you could actually do. So I got some ideas here, and again, this would play into different play characters, some more than others. So you couldn't probably align all of them at the same time, but the chances of you having 8 different ones in a room is, well, it's possible, but so you've got what if experimentation. So, to invite that bigger, bolder thinking. So rather than how do we improve our customer service, what would it look like if our customer service felt like Disney, or something else more playful. I mean, you pick what it is, but it's more for expansive thinking. And again, that doesn't feel like too circusy to me. I think it takes you into the realm of possibility rather than shutting things down. There's the reverse thinking game. So rather than how could we make this rather than how do we solve this problem, how could we make this problem worse, which actually can be done with some level of humour to it, because you have the opportunity to utterly catastrophize.
I like that one.
And there's some real, and there's some stuff, because it sparks other stuff in it. It's not always totally ridiculous. I mean, Stuart Brown does talk about, he's got 7 properties of play, and one of them is about purposelessness. But the fact is that he's saying that when you think that there's no purpose to it, you'll find that there often is. So even though people are going, what the fuck are we doing this for? Of course we're not going to get eaten by aliens and, shat out on another planet. Jesus, I don't know where that actually came from, but as a catastrophe. Might be that you just told me that your cat's done something awful in your bed, but there might not be anything of coming out of that, but just the whole art of flipping the thing might actually show you how you could actually fix it. So I love that one. Low stakes simulation games. So this is, people won't like role playing, but you could do it in different ways. I'm not asking people to interpretive dance, but it's about acting out solutions, or maybe drawing them, or as I say, creating them in Lego, or writing, and you can take that into different sort of like storytelling and playful communication. So you could have people. I'm about to run a team development day for some people that wanted more play in it, and they got to present their line of sight strategies for the next 6 months. So there's not going to be a PowerPoint slide in sight, but I have written them a playbook of different mediums they could do it in. So it's write a newspaper article about what the success looks like when you get there, create it in Lego, do a pretend film bit, so there's a
I
whole
want to come on
range of
this
different
workshop
mediums that I've come up with the different resources they've got for it. So one could be a radio interview. So there's a whole host of different things, but all of it has got to tell the story of their line of sight without having any PowerPoint slides. So it will either be an utter disaster or it will be very good. So I will tell you on another episode at some point how that's going. But
it sounds super fun
to get people into a different psychological state. And one of the other things that Stuart Brown talks about is that in play there is more psychological safety, because it lightens the mood. There aren't any wrong answers. There's more humour. And the other thing I'm trying to just find in my notes on the properties that he came up with is that because there's a voluntary nature to it, you can decide how much you want to be in the play zone and how much you don't. So if you think back to that story I told at the beginning, this is more by good luck than good management that we've actually brought it all the way back round. But my voluntary nature was, bugger that, this is mad. I'm going to go and sit in a corner with a piece of paper and not get too involved because this is insane, to feeling safer, getting attracted into the water fighting mode, and I mean, he uses
then go ballistic.
Again, not for any of the wrong reasons, but psychologically aroused, because the whole play thing brings out a different form of arousal for what we want to do in terms of connection. And
I think your brain goes into a different. There absolutely is. Your brain goes into a different place. There's a different energy. Everything. I think
No, no, no,
Yeah,
not at all. I'm just trying to
sorry,
see if
I
there were
interrupted you.
any, and then some of the other ideas. So the the psychological safety when you feel like you've got that. If you are actually trying out things in interactive meetings. So whilst I say, you know, maybe this doesn't happen in the routine meeting or whatever, there could be where you actually get people to do their routine update 2 minute hot seat where you literally have it on the stopwatch. Stop! So people get used to encapsulating ideas rather than
Yeah,
fucking taking everybody else's airtime as well, which I've had far too much of that. Or the 6 word
yes.
stories. So that goes a little bit to that one where you were saying
Ooh,
where you take things around, but
that's
it
hard
makes
too.
people really think about what's important. And again,
Yeah.
always having the whiteboards, the sticky notes, so just people can just be up whether it's needed or not. But so none of those things are as forced. And then, you know, if you are looking for the team building things, then the escape room things, the problem solving element, you know, where you are going and having fun. Again, this group of people that I'm doing the storyboard and the storytelling thing with, they're having a murder mystery dinner at the end of it, which again, I really wish
Oh, nice. And
I
you
needed
get to
to
dress
test. Oh, I
up.
don't know if I must ask them if they're doing that. So they
Oh, come on,
really
they have to go all
should. They
Poirot on
really
it,
should.
don't they? Really?
And then I mentioned it, but the movement based meetings, so that you are up for the kinesthetic, you know, making sure that you're up and
Mm.
moving around. And the thing I like about it as well with play is it covers off all learning styles. It doesn't matter if you're auditory, visual,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
kinesthetic. That you can have that level, and I think all of the things that I've just described are not so off the wall that a leader couldn't go, actually, that wouldn't be such a bad idea, just to try and break the cycle on something. So that's it's the little things
No,
that you
I
drop in.
totally agree. And I think it's, and again, that point about also, it allows for, neurodivergence. I know you said different learning styles, but also, um, as you said, different
Yeah,
levels of confidence, all kinds of things. And actually, it quells a little bit of the one who's always taking, the one who's always noisy or the one who's always talking, and allows some people who are maybe less um, confident in terms of speaking to actually do something beautifully artistic or not beautifully artistic, whatever it is. I think that's I like the fact it's sort of it's a much more democratic way of bringing in, and when I say democratic, meaning that it opens it up to everybody and gives everyone an equal chance to be able to
I
participate
completely
in the
agree.
way
And the
that they
way that
feel
we were
comfortable.
talking about how storytelling opens up the level of respect across the whole audience, I think that play does absolutely the same thing, because people can be as much in it as they want to
Yeah.
be, or as not. You know, from that perspective, but they can swim in a very different place whilst it's actually going on. And I think that everyone can be eventually quite relaxed in it, because I clearly wasn't, and yet it
Yeah.
grew as the day as the time went on.
I think that there is an element of discomfort at the beginning for some people more than others, but I absolutely agree that as you kind of get into it after a little while, there is an aha moment where you just think, yeah, okay, that's it. And there is, I think that you mentioned um, a little while back about joy and, oh no, sorry, about self-care, and how there is an element of this sort of self-care, because I do think that there's play, even when it's not sort of complete, that childlike, just total immersion in play that you get as a kid. But I think there is an element of, it does spark joy. There is a spark of joy in that freedom, and particularly when, if you're in a work environment, to suddenly have the freedom to do something. I think there is, for many people, for most people that I've ever seen or worked with in that sort of environment, it brings about joy, and there is this little just something that then, I would go away and people would say, "Oh God, I was in work the other day and I just remembered doing that thing and it just made me smile." And we all took away our little Lego ducks, for example, and people would have them on their desks or have them, in places, and you just see the Lego duck and you just have a little, "Oh yeah, God, I remember
And
that was fun.
I think
That was
that
really
so
fun."
the joy
So
piece as well and the self-care, I think that what happens during the activities as well is that it diminishes self-consciousness, which again I align very much with self-care, because you've then got the self-talk of, oh my God, I must be looking like an idiot, and all of that sort of like that just gets blown away.
yeah,
And then, as you say, the way that Stuart Brown describes it, it's the continuation. God's sake, the continuation of desire. So even after the event, the wanting to go back and do more. You talked about that from the course that you were on. Really pleased to see glitter and paint when you entered the room, and when you look at the duck.
yeah,
The continuation of what you actually learned,
yeah,
or the messaging in it, it's strong. So I do
yeah.
feel like
Really,
our
really
last
strong.
two episodes on storytelling and play have really strong. I'm a very strong advocate for them to be in leadership strategies.
Yes, I think I think that's I think it's really important for leaders to understand that. And I love that idea of incorporating it into strategies. And I can completely see how uncomfortable it would make a lot of people initially. But I think that anyone who has experienced it, once leaders have experienced the play, how impactful play can be, I think that they're very easily
Yeah.
converted into understanding why it's important. But yeah, on the face of it, when you say it to people, I
What
completely
you're talking
understand that
about,
people would go, "What the fuck are
absolutely.
you
And
talking
what?
about, Bobby?
And
Go
why are you
away, you
dressed as a
idiot."
court jester and hitting me with a balloon? I've now got to work. I've now got to go
But
away and
yes,
work out how to
absolutely.
work on AI to turn you into a cat and me into a court jester for the picture of this one. It has to be done. It has to be done. Oh my God,
Yay!
we have been well and truly over time this time. But as I knew, I have loved this episode. I've loved this episode about play, and thank you
Me
for
too.
being alongside me in it, because I knew it'd be fun.
Absolute pleasure. It has been super fun, and I am glad to have played a part in making you happy in getting this episode, a full episode on play,
Thank
ready
you very much.
for
You are my compass of
publication
you are
or
my
whatever
compass
it's
of joy.
called. Pleasure.
See you next time. Oh,
What
oh!
about a
How did
quote,
I
man?
forget that? Yes, because the quote is by
I don't know.
Mr. George Bernard Shaw. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. Word. Drop the
Word.
mic. Now we can go.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Right then. Till next time. Bye.
And that is a wrap on season 5 of More Than a Lumpy Jumper. We've loved bringing you this season, diving into new ways of thinking, leading, playing, and showing up in the world. And we couldn't have asked for a better way to close it than with play itself, because let's be honest, we could all use a little more of it. We'll be taking a short break, but watch this space. We'll be back with season 6 in May, bringing even more conversations, insights, and of course, a little mischief along the way. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe on your platform of choice so you never miss an episode. And if you've been loving what we do, hit those 5 stars and leave us a review. It's the best way to help others find the show too. So until next time, go play, be curious, and leading, loving, living in the best ways you can. We'll see you back here very soon.